Learning English is like building a house. You start small, step by step. At first, it can be hard, but every word you learn is a brick. I remember when I began. I felt nervous. I didn't know many words, but I kept going. I would say the words out loud, over and over. It helped me get better. One day, I met a friend. She said, "Practice makes perfect." I thought about this and practiced more. I listened to stories in English and repeated them. Little by little, it started to feel more natural. I made mistakes, but I didn't let that stop me. Mistakes are part of learning. One of my favorite memories is when I was at the park reading a book. A little girl asked me, "What are you reading?" I smiled, and we read together. It was a simple English book, but it helped me learn. Sharing what I knew made learning easier. There was also a time when I went to a cafe. The menu was in English, and I didn't understand everything, but I asked the waiter for help. He explained the menu, and I felt proud. It was a small win, but it meant a lot. I used to write new words in a notebook every night. I would read them before bed. This helped me remember. Sometimes I was afraid to speak because I thought people would laugh, but then I learned that people are kind. They understand your learning. One time I spoke with a man in the park. My English wasn't perfect, but he smiled and said, "It's about trying." I felt better after that. I also found that talking to myself in the mirror helped. It felt funny, but it made me feel more confident. I learned that it's important to be patient. Learning takes time, but every small step counts. I also found that using English every day helped me improve. I watched English TV, listened to music, and even changed my phone to English. When I felt stuck, I didn't give up. I remembered a quote, "Little by little, one travels far." Learning English isn't about rushing. It's about taking one step at a time. One of the best tips I got was to think in English. At first, this was hard, but with practice it became easier. I also started to write in English every day. This helped me practice and improve over time. I started to feel more confident. One day, I gave a speech in English. I was nervous, but I practiced a lot. When I finished, people clapped. It felt amazing. I realized my hard work had paid off. I also joined an English group. We met once a week to practice. It was fun, and I learned a lot. My friends helped me when I made mistakes. We laughed together, and that made learning feel easier. I learned that the more you practice, the better you get. Keep going, even if it feels hard. Slowly, you'll improve, and one day, you'll be able to speak with confidence. I also learned that it's okay to make mistakes. Every time you make one, you learn something new, so don't be afraid to try. The more you practice, the better you'll become. So remember, learning English is like building a house. Start with small steps. Keep practicing. It may take time, but every day will bring you closer to your goal. Chapter 2. When I first started learning English, I felt lost. I didn't know many words, and I was afraid to speak. I thought, how can I speak when I don't know enough? But I didn't give up. Every day I learned new words. Slowly, it started to feel easier. I found that listening to English was really helpful. I listened to songs, watched videos, and even listened to stories. The more I listened, the more words I learned. I also repeated what I heard. Sometimes I would pause the video and say the sentences aloud. This helped me remember the words. At first, I was shy. I didn't want to speak because I was afraid of making mistakes, but I realized that everyone makes mistakes. It's part of learning. I started to speak little by little. I said simple sentences. When I made a mistake, I didn't get upset. I just tried again. One day I met a person who was also learning English. We became friends. We practiced speaking together. We made mistakes, but we helped each other. It was fun to learn with someone else. We laughed when we made silly mistakes, and that made learning feel easier. I also learned that writing in English helps a lot. I started writing small sentences every day. At first it was hard, but with practice I got better. I kept a notebook with new words and sentences. Every night before bed, I would read my notebook. It was like a little bedtime story. Sometimes I felt frustrated. I wanted to speak fluently, but I couldn't yet. I thought, why is it so hard? But I reminded myself that learning takes time. I kept going, even when I felt stuck. I knew that one day I would be better. I also learned that it's important to practice every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Practicing every day helps. I set a small goal for myself. I would learn 5 new words each week. At first, it was hard, but soon I could remember more words. This made me feel good. One day, I went to a store, and the cashier spoke to me in English. I understood everything she said, and I was able to reply. I felt so proud. It was a small moment, but it showed me that I was improving. I also started watching English movies with subtitles. This helped me understand what the characters were saying. I would pause the movie and repeat the sentences. It felt like I was talking with the actors. This simple trick helped me practice speaking and listening at the same time. When I was learning, I remember a quote, "Slow and steady wins the race." Learning English is like that. You don't have to be perfect. Just keep going, and little by little, you will improve. There were days when I felt tired. I didn't want to study, but I kept going. I knew that every small effort would add up. I also learned that it's important to rest. Sometimes you need to take a break, but after the break, keep practicing. One of my favorite ways to practice was by reading. At first, I read simple books like children's stories. They were easy to understand. Slowly, I started reading more difficult books. I would look up words I didn't know. Each time I learned a new word, it felt like a small victory. I also started to use English in my daily life. I would label things around the house. I put labels on the fridge, the door, and even the chair. This way, I saw English words every day. It helped me learn new words and remember them. One time, I went to a park. I was sitting on a bench, reading a book, when a girl came to me. She asked, "What are you reading?" I smiled and showed her my book. We sat together and read. Slowly, I could understand the book better. Now, it was a simple story, but it made me feel good. I learned that it's okay to ask for help. One day, I didn't understand a word, so I asked a friend. She explained it to me, and I understood it. I realized that people are kind and want to help. It's okay to ask when you don't know something. I also started to practice speaking alone. It felt strange at first. I would stand in front of a mirror and speak. I pretended I was talking to someone. This helped me feel more comfortable when I spoke with other people. Over time, I started to feel more confident. One day, I gave a small speech in English. I was nervous, but I practiced a lot. When I finished, people clapped. I felt proud. It was a big moment for me. Learning English isn't always easy. There will be days when you feel like giving up, but remember, learning takes time. Keep practicing, and you will improve. The key is to keep going, even when it feels hard. I also learned that it's important to celebrate small victories. Every time I learned a new word, I felt happy. These small wins kept me motivated to keep learning. Every day, I tried to do something to practice English, whether it was reading a book, listening to a song, or speaking with a friend. I made sure to practice every day. It wasn't always easy, but with each day, I got better. Now, I can speak more confidently. I still make mistakes, but that's okay. I know that every mistake is a chance to learn. If I keep practicing, I'll keep improving. I will continue to get better. Chapter 3. As I kept learning English, I started to realize how important it is to practice every day. At first, I didn't understand this. I thought, why do I need to practice so much? But the more I practiced, the easier it became. I could see small changes, and that made me feel proud. I started with simple things. Every day I learned 5 new words. I wrote them down in a notebook and read them before bed. This helped me remember them. After a few weeks, I could see that my vocabulary was growing. I knew more words, and I could understand English better. I also started listening to English more. I would listen to English songs, podcasts, and even radio stations. At first, I didn't understand much, but I didn't stop. I kept listening. Slowly, I started to understand more words and sentences. The more I listened, the better I got at speaking too. One day I tried something new. I watched a movie in English without subtitles. It was hard at first. I didn't understand everything, but I didn't give up. I watched the movie twice. The second time, I understood more. It was exciting to see how much I had learned. I also realized that learning English is not just about studying. It's about using English in real life. I started to speak with my friends in English. Sometimes I felt nervous. I was afraid of making mistakes, but I learned that making mistakes is okay. Everyone makes them. The important thing is to keep going. One time I was at a cafe, and I had to order food in English. I was nervous, but I did it anyway. I asked the waiter for a sandwich, and he understood me. I felt happy. It was a small moment, but it showed me that I could use English in real situations. I also started to write more in English. At first, I just wrote simple sentences, but then I wrote longer ones. I kept a journal where I wrote about my day in English. It wasn't perfect, but it helped me practice. I started to write emails in English too. Every time I finished one, I felt proud. I learned that learning English is like a plant growing. At first, it's small, but if you take care of it every day, it will grow bigger and stronger. Sometimes I felt frustrated. I wanted to learn faster, but I remembered that good things take time. It's okay to go slowly. One day, I met a person who was also learning English. We became friends and practiced together. We helped each other. We would talk about our day, and when one of us didn't know a word, the other would help. It made learning more fun. I also started reading more in English. At first, I read simple books. Then I started reading news articles and stories. Some of the words were hard, but I didn't stop. I looked up words I didn't know, and slowly I started to understand more. Reading helped me learn new words and improve my grammar. I learned that it's important to be patient with yourself. There will be times when you feel stuck. You might feel like you're not learning fast enough, but if you keep going, you will improve. I had days when I felt like I wasn't making progress, but when I looked back, I could see how much I had learned. Another thing that helped me was speaking with people who spoke English well. I was afraid at first, but I realized that they were happy to help me. They didn't care about my mistakes. They just wanted to practice with me. It made me feel better and helped me improve faster. Sometimes I would practice speaking in front of the mirror. It felt strange, but it helped me feel more comfortable. I practiced saying new words and sentences. The more I practiced, the easier it became to speak. Speaking in front of the mirror also helped me work on my pronunciation. I also found that watching English TV shows was helpful. I started with shows that were easy to understand. I watched with subtitles at first, but later I tried watching without them. It helped me improve my listening skills. I could understand more, and it felt good to see my progress. I also learned to celebrate my small wins. When I learned a new word or understood a sentence, I would feel happy. These small wins kept me motivated. I realized that learning English is not about being perfect. It's about trying every day and getting better over time. One thing that really helped me was setting small goals. I would focus on one thing at a time. One week, I focused on learning new words. The next week, I practiced speaking. By breaking my learning into small parts, it became easier to manage. I learned that it's important to use English in real situations. Whether it's ordering food at a restaurant or talking to a friend, using English every day helps you learn faster. I started using English when I went to the store or when I needed to ask for directions. The more I used it, the better I got. I also started thinking in English. At first it was hard. My mind would switch to my native language, but with time, I started thinking in English more often. It helped me speak faster and feel more comfortable when I talked. One of my biggest lessons was to be kind to myself. Learning a new language is hard. There will be times when you feel frustrated or tired, but it's important to be patient. Every small step is a step forward. As I kept practicing, I saw how much I had improved. It felt good to know that all my hard work was paying off. Learning English was not easy, but it was worth it. Now I feel more confident when I speak, and I know that I will keep improving if I keep practicing every day. Chapter 4. As time went on, I started to realize that learning English is not just about the words, it's also about feeling confident. At first, I was shy. I was afraid of making mistakes, but slowly I learned that it's okay to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. I remember the first time I had a real conversation in English. I was at the park, and a stranger asked me for directions. I felt nervous. I didn't know if I could help, but I took a deep breath and tried. I spoke slowly and carefully. The person understood me. That made me feel so proud. I realized that speaking English is not about being perfect. It's about trying. I also started to meet more people who spoke English. Some of them were learning like me, and others were native speakers. I learned a lot from both. We would talk about simple things like the weather or what we had for lunch. These small conversations helped me get better. I practiced every day, and I could feel myself improving. One thing that helped me a lot was finding a study partner. I found someone who was also learning English, and we practiced together. We would correct each other's mistakes and help each other learn new words. It was fun because we would laugh at the mistakes, and that made learning feel less stressful. I also began to focus on listening more. I listened to English podcasts, music, and even the news. At first, I didn't understand everything, but the more I listened, the easier it became. I could pick out new words and understand what people were saying. It was like a puzzle, and every time I understood a little more, I felt excited. Another way I practiced listening was by watching TV shows in English. I would watch with subtitles at first, and then when I felt more comfortable, I would turn them off. It was challenging, but I got better with time. I would repeat sentences after the actors to help my pronunciation. This helped me sound more like a native speaker. I also began reading more in English. I started with easy books like children's stories. Then I moved to news articles and short stories. Sometimes I would have to look up words in a dictionary, but I didn't mind. It felt good to learn something new every time I read. I learned new words and got better at understanding English. Writing was another skill I worked on. At first, I wrote simple sentences. Then I started to write short paragraphs. I would write about my day, what I did, or my thoughts. Writing helped me organize my ideas and improve my grammar. I also started writing emails in English. It wasn't always easy, but it felt good to communicate in another language. One thing I learned was to not compare myself to others. Everyone learns at their own pace. Sometimes I would see someone speaking perfect English and I would feel discouraged. But I remembered that I'm still learning, and that's okay. It's important to focus on your own progress, not someone else's. I also learned that it's important to have fun while learning. If you make learning fun, it doesn't feel like a chore. I started playing word games in English, like crosswords and puzzles. These games helped me learn new words in a fun way. Sometimes I would listen to English songs and try to sing along. It helped me with my pronunciation, and it was fun too. There were times when I felt frustrated. I would forget words or I would make the same mistakes over and over again, but I learned not to be too hard on myself. I would remind myself that it's okay to make mistakes. It's how you learn. Every time I made a mistake, I would try again, and little by little, I got better. Another important lesson was to not be afraid to speak. When I first started, I was scared that people would laugh at me if I made a mistake. but I learned that people are kind and they appreciate when you try to speak their language. I started speaking more, even when I was nervous. The more I spoke, the more confident I became. I also found that setting small goals helped me stay motivated. I would set a goal to learn 5 new words a week, or to speak in English for 10 minutes a day. These small goals made learning feel more manageable. When I reached my goal, I felt proud and ready to set a new one. One thing I did was change the language on my phone to English. At first, it was difficult, but soon I started to get used to it. I also followed English-speaking accounts on social media. This helped me see English in everyday life and learn new words. One of the most helpful things I did was to think in English. At first, it was hard. My mind would switch to my native language, but I tried to think in English more and more. This helped me speak faster and feel more natural. It took time, but I kept practicing. I also learned that it's important to be patient with yourself. Learning a language takes time, and it's okay to go slow. There were times when I wanted to speak perfectly right away, but I had to remind myself that learning takes time. If you keep practicing, you will get better, even if it doesn't happen overnight. As I continued learning, I saw how much I had grown. I could speak more confidently, understand more, and communicate better. Learning English was a journey, and every step I took made me stronger. I knew that if I kept practicing every day, I would continue to improve. I also started to help others who were learning English. I would share what I had learned and help them practice. It felt good to be able to help someone else. It reminded me of how far I had come and how much I had learned. Learning English wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. I learned to be patient, to have fun, and to keep trying every day. I became better, and I knew that the more I practiced, the more I would grow. Chapter 5. As I kept learning, I realized that the best way to learn English is to use it every day. I began to look for more chances to practice. Sometimes I would talk to my friends in English. They were patient and helped me when I made mistakes. Speaking with them made me feel more comfortable. I also started going to English classes. There I could practice with other students. It was nice to be in a group. We all made mistakes, but we helped each other. I learned new things every time I went. I looked forward to the classes because they made me feel like I was getting better. One day, I decided to join an online group where people practice speaking English. At first, I was nervous. I didn't know anyone there, and I was afraid of speaking in front of strangers. But I pushed myself to join the group. We talked about simple topics like hobbies or travel. It was fun, and everyone was very kind. That experience made me feel braver and more confident. Listening to English speakers became part of my daily routine. I watched YouTube videos, listened to podcasts, and followed English-speaking channels. At first, I didn't understand much, but I kept listening. Little by little, I began to understand more words and sentences. I even started to recognize different accents. This helped me improve my listening skills a lot. Sometimes I would stop what I was doing and repeat sentences I heard in the videos. It felt like I was practicing speaking without talking to anyone. This trick helped me get better at pronouncing words. Over time, I started to speak more clearly, and with less hesitation. I also made a habit of reading every day. I read news articles, books, and stories. At first, it was hard. I didn't know all the words, but I kept reading, and I looked up words I didn't understand. The more I read, the easier it became. Reading helped me learn how words fit together in a sentence and how sentences were formed. Writing in English was another way I practiced. I started writing short notes and messages. I wrote about my day, my thoughts, or things I liked. Writing was a great way to express myself. It also helped me remember new words. As I wrote more, I got better at making sentences and using new grammar. One day, I decided to write a letter in English. I was a bit scared, but I wanted to try. I wrote the letter to a friend I had met in an English class. It wasn't perfect, but I was proud of it. I sent it, and my friend replied. She said my English was getting better, and that made me so happy. Speaking was still the hardest skill for me, but I didn't give up. I made small goals, like speaking for 10 minutes a day. Sometimes I would talk to myself in the mirror. I would practice what I wanted to say before I said it to someone else. This made me feel less nervous when I had to speak with others. I also learned that making mistakes is okay. Everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers. If I didn't understand something, I would ask for help. I remember one time when I didn't know a word, I asked my teacher, and she explained it to me. I learned that it's okay to ask questions, and people are happy to help. One of the things that helped me stay motivated was setting small goals. Every week, I would try to learn 5 new words. I would practice saying them and use them in sentences. Sometimes I would write them in my notebook. It was a simple plan, but it worked. I felt proud every time I reached my goal. Another thing I did was listen to English music. I like to sing along to the songs. It helped me with my pronunciation and vocabulary. At first, I couldn't understand all the lyrics, but over time, I began to understand more. I started to recognize words and phrases I had learned before. There were times when I felt like I wasn't improving. I would forget words or I would make the same mistakes again. But I kept reminding myself that learning a language takes time. I remembered the quote, "Little by little, one travels far." I knew that if I kept practicing, I would improve. I also learned that the more I used English in real life, the better I got. I would speak to people when I went to the store or the park. Sometimes I would make mistakes, but that was okay. Each time I learned something new. Slowly, I started to feel more comfortable speaking English outside of class. One time I went to a cafe and ordered food in English. It was a small thing, but I felt proud. I could understand the waiter and answer his questions. I didn't feel nervous anymore. That day, I realized how far I had come. As I kept practicing, I began to see more progress. I could have longer conversations. I could understand more of what people said to me. I could read books and watch movies without needing to look up every word. I felt more confident in my English skills. I also learned that everyone has their own journey. Some people learn faster, while others take longer. That's okay. What matters is that you keep trying. Everyone starts somewhere, and every step you take is a step closer to your goal. I can see how much I have learned.